Hello, and welcome to another video from 3.5 Archive. Today we're going to be looking at the top 10 non-core base classes for D&D 3.5. This is going to be any base class not from the player's handbook. While this list is going to be based off of my personal opinion, I have gone through each class and rated it from 1 to 5 stars for flavor, which is the associated lore, backstory, and general identity of the class in the game world, on fun, which is just the mechanical variety and the amount of interaction you're going to have with the abilities of the class while playing it, and power, which is how strong the class is and versatile both in and out of combat. This definitely is not an exclusive list. This is merely a list of ones that I have rated the overall best base classes for D&D 3.5. So let's go ahead and get to the list. At number 10 we have the Hexblade from Complete Warrior. This is a D10 hit die full base attack bonus class that combines martial prowess with arcane spellcasting ability. The basic ability of this class is the Hexblade's Curse, which gives your foes penalties on attack rolls and damage and saving throws, and you can unleash it as a free action, which makes it a nice thing to use before you wade into melee. While you get the same spellcasting progression as Rangers and Paladins and a fairly narrow spell list, this class was disappointing to a lot of people overall and is not considered to be very powerful, but it is still a fun option for somebody looking to play an occult-themed warrior. At number 9 we have the Soul Knife from the expanded Psionics Handbook. While this might seem a strange psionic class to choose as a representative of that group of classes, the Soul Knife wins most of its points on flavor. While it suffers from the same issue as the Monk in being a warrior class that lacks a full base attack bonus, and a similar issue to the Scout where it relies on some sort of alternative to iterative attacks, except unfortunately in the case of the Soul Knife, one that requires a move action to power up, is still a very flavorful class for somebody who wants to play something akin to a Jedi from Star Wars in D&D. It's hard to deny that Soul Knives just have a very cool flavor to them, and can be retooled into all sorts of character archetypes, from assassins to bounty hunters, or to simply a psychic warrior, someone exotic and mysterious with unusual powers. Soul Knife is probably the most distinctive of the psionic classes, and that's a big part of what earns its place on this list. At number 8 we have the Spellthief from Complete Adventurer. This is a class that uses various types of trickery and magical talent to drain magic from their foes, and their main ability is being able to give up their sneak attack in order to steal a spell slot or spell from their target and later use the spell themselves. Later on, this class also gains the ability to steal spell-like abilities and even resistances from their foes. It does gain the Ranger Paladin type progression for spellcasting, and it does gain some sneak attack, but it tops out at 5d6 rather than 10d6 for the rogue. This makes it a poor substitute for the rogue, who can usually function pretty well in any campaign, but the Spellthief is pretty limited to campaigns that are going to feature a lot of arcane spellcasters, or at least monsters that have spell-like abilities. While it can be useful outside of that, and it can be nice to take a 1-level dip in order to boost your sneak attack a little bit ahead of schedule, it unfortunately is not going to be a very good class overall, but it is extremely flavorful and one of the best class concepts that 3.5 came out with, and in the right campaign it can be extremely satisfying to play. At number 7 we have the Favored Soul from either the Miniatures Handbook or Complete Divine. The Favored Soul is to the cleric what the sorcerer is to the wizard. It's a spontaneous caster, divine spellcaster, and it also gains weapon focus with your deity's favored weapon, and some types of energy resistance, and eventually wings and damage reduction as well. You are essentially a chosen one of the deity that you choose to worship. And like with the sorcerer, you learned your abilities from intuition and raw channeling of your innate power, rather than careful study. Favored Souls are a great class role-playing wise, as you could be a prophet or chosen one of a deity, and in certain cases the story could really revolve around your character as a catalyst for various events in the campaign. While the class features do seem a little bit thin, and while, more importantly, being limited to a list of spells known does take away some of the advantages of the divine spellcasting spell list, as you do use the cleric spell list for this class, It is still quite powerful, and you do get more spells per day than the cleric does, so if there's one or two that you particularly like to use a lot, this can be a very useful class for that. A favored soul who makes the right spell selections can be as good of a healer and combat support specialist as the cleric. While you are going to have difficulty in those particular situations that a cleric would handle effortlessly simply by preparing the right spells without even needing to know them, it is going to be very satisfying and very fun to get a lot more spell slots than your average divine spellcaster, and enjoy the unique role-playing opportunities that this class affords you compared to a cleric. At number 6 we have the Dragonfire Adept from the Dragon Magic Sourcebook. This class is pretty similar to the Warlock, except with a breath weapon rather than Eldritch Blast, and with various invocations you can use to shape said breath weapon, as well as for a variety of other purposes. In many ways, it's an improvement on the Dragon Shaman class, which was a lot more similar to the Martial in that it projected various auras. The Dragon Shaman would have made this list, as it's just as good flavor-wise, but mechanically speaking, the Dragonfire Adept is a lot more active with the invocations rather than the passive auras, and thus it takes the lead over its earlier counterpart. You also gain scales for natural armor. At early levels, this class is very strong, giving you an at-will breath weapon that's going to outdamage the wizard's Burning Hand spell at first level, while affecting the same area, potentially. While Burning Hand certainly isn't the best first level spell, it still goes to show that this ability is going to be very helpful at lower levels, giving you the ability to damage multiple opponents, and still having the durability to survive on the front lines to use it. Up next at number 5 we have the Swordsage from the Book of Nine Swords. The 3 classes from this book used maneuvers, which were templated warrior attacks, vaguely supernatural and Eastern themed, that each class gained access to a subset of. The Swordsage focused on pure study as opposed to the Crusader's virtuous force of good, or the Warblade's focus on pure martial strength and prowess. As such, the Swordsage got to add its wisdom bonus to its armor class, and also got a scaling bonus to initiative rolls. While all 3 of the classes were similar in function, the Crusader has a little bit of overlap with the Paladin, and the Warblade a slight bit of overlap with the Fighter. The Swordsage really doesn't have much of a counterpart elsewhere in the D&D 3.5 class list, except for maybe the Swashbuckler or Monk, and it functions vaguely as a combination of the two. At number 4 we have the Warlock. A character's made a dark pact with a demon lord or other powerful entity in order to gain strange eldritch power. It's also the only non-core 3.5 class that has the honor of making it into the 5th edition of D&D. The Warlock gains Eldritch Blast, which is a reliable and repeatable source of damage capable of dealing with most things, as it is typeless damage and thus not subject to any resistances or anything like that. They also gain Invocations, which are a variety of at-will abilities, allowing them to not have to deal with tracking spell slots and simply be able to use their abilities at will. While these abilities are weaker than the spells that an equivalently leveled sorcerer or wizard would get, they are repeatable, and this means that you don't have to worry about when or where to use them. As such, you have a wide repertoire that you have access to at any time, and it's a different playstyle of character, giving you a lot more flexibility and options. Overall, though, you simply won't have as many options as a wizard, sorcerer, or especially cleric or druid is going to. Still, it's a fun and flavorful class to play for the right type of campaign, and there are a variety of prestige classes themed toward it, such as the Eldritch Theurge, which allows you to combine your warlock abilities with normal arcane spellcasting, or the Enlightened Spirit, which, as most warlocks are limited to non-good alignment, allows you to become good aligned and replace some of your abilities with ones more befitting a holy crusader, rather than a dark eldritch shaman. At number 3 we have the Duskblade from the Player's Handbook 2. This is another class that blends martial and arcane power, like the Hexblade, but far more effectively. You get a decent number of spell slots in this class, which is based on an ancient elvish practice of blending blade and spell into one fluid fighting style. And you also get at 3rd level the signature feature of the class, Arcane Channeling, which lets you cast touch spells through your weapon while making an attack. You can only do this with one attack at first, but later on you get the ability to channel a spell through your full attack, allowing you to get much more mileage out of a touch range spell than the average wizard or sorcerer would. You also gain the ability to swift quicken a spell several times a day, letting you cast it as a swift action. This can give you a lot of versatility in combat, and also help you squeeze more attack power out of a class that has two different sets of abilities, but still only one turn to use them on. A Duskblade channeling Shocking Grasp can put out quite a respectable amount of damage, especially at lower levels, and even into middle levels. The Duskblade isn't going to be quite as good of a frontliner as a fighter or barbarian, but it's still a very flavorful class and definitely an adequate substitute for those classes, along with giving you some utility spells that will help your party out. At number 2, we have the War Mage from the Complete Arcane Sourcebook. This is an evocation-focused spellcasting class that gives you knowledge of all of the spells on your class spell list at once, with the, of course, balancing limitation that they are all evocation spells. This is going to be a blasting-focused class. You do get to add your intelligence modifier to the damage of damage-dealing spells that you cast, and you do get a variety of other features, including the ability to wear light armor to give yourself a little bit more durability. War mages in the lore are specialized spellcasters trained at elite academies by kingdoms who want their armies to have a strong spellcasting element to them. It's this flavor and the fun and flexibility of the War Mage class that make up for its narrow focus. While you don't want a War Mage to be the only spellcaster in your party, as a supplemental one, they're going to be very helpful and effective at dealing out a lot of damage to whatever threat your party's facing. You get a lot of spell slots, you get advanced learning, which allows you to grab some evocation spells from outside of your class spell list if there's one on the Sorcerer Wizard spell list that particularly appeals to you, and you also gain Sudden Widen, Sudden Maximize, and similar spells that will allow you to apply meta magic despite being a spontaneous caster. It's a great class for anybody who wants to truly and thoroughly embrace the most popular archetype of a wizard, if not necessarily the most effective one. And at number 1 for non-core D&D 3.5 base classes, we have the Beguiler. The Beguiler doesn't seem like very much, as its list of class features is pretty blank. It does allow you to do a strange thing where you feint in combat to give your spells extra bonus to their save DC as you cloak your casting and make it a little bit more difficult to resist your magic. But the Beguiler's strength lies in a similar setup to the War Mage, where you have access to all of your class spell list as spells known. At each level you gain access to them, and you can cast them all at once with plenty of spell slots. That, with a large number of skill points and a lot of great social skills, make the Beguiler an extremely fun class to play, especially in roleplay or intrigue or investigation-heavy campaigns. The Beguiler is a very flexible class, despite its narrow spellcasting focus, and a player who enjoys clever plots and schemes will get a lot of mileage out of this class. Finally, a runner-up and potentially tie for first place in some points of view would be the Archivist class. This class from the Heroes of Horror sourcebook is a bit obscure, but it does give you a prayer book which allows you to cast divine spells, learning them and preparing them in the same way that a wizard would. While again this takes away quite a bit of the versatility of a divine spellcaster, it's made up for by the Dark Knowledge feature, which allows you to, several times per day, make knowledge checks to give your allies bonuses to saving throws and attacks against monsters that you are able to share knowledge about. It even allows you to eventually invoke a dark secret about the monster to cause it to become stunned by the disturbing knowledge that you unleash on it, about its own nature perhaps. With a dark and mysterious flavor, and a motivation fitting to pretty much any D&D campaign, the Archivist would be an excellent addition to any party, and would be a strong contender to this list. Other runners-up would include the Binder from Tome of Magic, which allowed you to bind the symbols of various entities to yourself for different powers, as well as the Totemist from Magic of Incarnum, as Incarnum is a very unique and flavorful style of magic that unfortunately was never really brought into later editions of the game. Constructing this list was pretty difficult and, again, ultimately boiled down to my own opinion, as it was very difficult to pare down the list of interesting and flavorful classes that D&D 3.5 offers beyond the base 11 in the Player's Handbook, down to a list of just 10 that I would consider the best. So that will be about it for this top 10 list. Please like, share, comment, subscribe, and so on. Let me know in the comments what you'd like to see for the next video, and thanks for watching. I will see you all next time on 3.5 Archive.